He wraps his arm around me for the cameras after calling me a monster behind closed doors. The flash pops just to my left, but I don't flinch. My spine is steel now. His grip is firm, fake, like every family moment he's sold since the day Claire died. A tight squeeze, a whisper in my ear, "Don't ruin this." The pastor drones on, but the pews aren't listening. They're watching us, mother and father of the dead girl, neatly seated together, unified in grief. I glance at the coffin. Satin-lined, spotless white, overly expensive, just like David likes it, everything performative, nothing honest. I wonder if anyone here knows Claire hadn't spoken to him in months. I wonder if anyone noticed she never called him Dad after the night she came home crying and never told me why. "I did," I asked. She said nothing, just held me and said she was tired. The whispers in the back rows started before the ceremony even began. They were divorced, right? I heard she moved out. Wasn't there some custody thing? The choir tries to drown them out, but doubt hums louder than hymns. David stands when prompted, eyes wet, voice shaking. "She was joy in motion," he says, "a light that taught us love." I wait for the lightning to strike. It doesn't. It never does. That's how liars survive. God stays silent for them. When it's my turn, I stay seated. I feel his glare slice the side of my face, but I don't move. Someone else reads Claire's favorite poem. Not me. Never me. Not in his version of her life. After the service, mourners move like fog, hugging us, muttering meaningless condolences. She looked so peaceful. "She's in a better place. You were such wonderful parents." I taste blood behind my teeth. Denise walks up and touches my elbow. Her eyes flick to David, then back to me. Later she mouths. I nod. I know what she saw. I know what he whispered near the altar. But I'm not ready yet. The hallway smells like old pine cleaner and funeral flowers. David's tie is perfectly knotted. He grips the folded eulogy like it's a resume. A reporter asks for a comment. He obliges. She was our everything, and we'll never stop loving her. I step away. I step outside. I breathe. The parking lot is gray with drizzle. I hear my own heartbeat in my ears. He told me 2 nights ago in the hallway of Claire's apartment, after calling me hysterical, after blaming me for letting her spiral, he told me, "You say one thing to the press and I'll bury you next." I believed him then. I'm not so sure now. I look at the people filing out, at the girl in the blue hoodie wiping her eyes, at the old man shaking his head. I look at the blinking red dome of the church's security camera above the exit. And for the first time since Claire died, I think maybe the truth will outlive him after all. I reach into my purse and feel the old phone. Claire's old phone. It buzzes softly when I touch the screen. There's only one saved voicemail. I haven't listened to it since the night she died. But I know what it says, and I know who needs to hear it. Not yet, but soon. Because grief is temporary. Shame fades. But proof, that's forever. Proof doesn't beg to be believed, it just waits. I didn't come to bury her alone. I came to bury the lie with her. I'm Melissa, 46, a former nurse from Tacoma, Washington. The night before the funeral, I ironed a dress I hadn't worn since Claire's high school graduation. Same deep navy, same stiff collar, she used to say, made me look like a principal from a sad movie. I held it up against the light, and for a second I could almost hear her laugh. Not the laugh she had at 7 or 12 or even 16, but the one she had the last time she came home, quiet, short, cautious, like she was rationing joy. The room was too quiet without her. I hadn't touched her sketchbook until that night. It was where she left it, under the pile of college mailers she never answered. Inside, a half-finished sketch of a moth. Not a butterfly. Claire hated butterflies. Too expected, she used to say. Too symmetrical. Moths are messier, more honest. I traced the outline with my finger and felt something tear, but not loud enough to cry. Not yet. I found the old phone 2 drawers down, still charged somehow. She never switched numbers even after she left. Maybe she didn't want to disappear completely. I pressed play. Her voice was soft, almost inaudible, like she was in the next room but didn't want anyone to hear. "Hey, Mom. I'm okay. I wanted to say I'm sorry for not calling. I promised I wouldn't tell you. I'm sorry." Then silence. No timestamp, no follow-up, just that. I pressed it again, then again. Each time the same pause, the same ache. That voicemail wasn't new. It had lived in that phone for weeks before Claire died. I'd found it the night I got the call. But I couldn't listen then. Not really. I was too numb, too scared to understand what she meant by he. I knew, of course. Mothers always know. but knowledge without action is just cowardice. David called the next morning to ask if I wanted to speak at the service. His voice was syrupy, all false softness. "Only if it's healing, Melissa," he said. "No drama. Claire deserves peace." That was his way of saying, stay quiet. Let me control the narrative. Let them see me as the grieving father, the stable one, the authority. I said sure, then hung up. Then I printed the hospital paperwork again, Claire's last discharge from the psych wing. I highlighted the section that read, "Discharged without attending psychiatrist sign-off. Unverified signature on file." I stared at the forged line, the date, the hospital letterhead. I'd seen 1,000 like it during my time as a nurse, but this one didn't just make me angry, it made me complicit. Because I'd let her go back to him. Because I didn't scream loud enough when she stopped coming home. Because I trusted silence more than I trusted my gut. Motif seed, I used to believe the truth could speak for itself, but now silence was his weapon, and I had sharpened it by obeying. That night, I folded the printout, slipped it behind the sketchbook, and placed both in my bag. The voicemail stayed on the phone untouched like a loaded gun. I wasn't ready to fire. Not yet. But tomorrow, when the cameras started flashing, when the pews filled with nodding heads and soft sobs, when David reached for my hand like we were still a wee tomorrow, something inside me would finally snap. Because there's grief. And then there's guilt. And only one of them makes you lie this well. I didn't know if I wanted justice or just to stop drowning in shame. Tomorrow I'd bury Claire, and maybe part of myself. But I wasn't going to bury the truth. The obituary ran 2 weeks before the funeral, and David made sure his name came first. Claire Elise Reyes, beloved daughter of David and Melissa Reyes. The order mattered to him. Always had. He emailed it to the local paper without asking me, then forwarded me the confirmation as if I were part of the planning, not an afterthought. I stared at the phrase, "estranged mother," buried halfway through the second paragraph. I hadn't moved. Claire had. She left after Christmas. Left because she couldn't sleep in the same house where her father's temper echoed off the walls. David told everyone it was college stress. "She's just overwhelmed," he'd say with a rehearsed frown. Sensitive like her mother. He knew how to disarm people. A little humility, a soft sigh. But I'd seen him corner her with words, cut her self-worth to ribbons behind closed doors, then charm the neighbors with his volunteer work and photo ops. The night he emailed the obituary, I sat in Claire's old room reading the messages she'd scribbled on the walls behind her posters. Tiny phrases in pencil, "Don't cry in front of him, leave if it gets loud. Pretend you're fine." I took a photo of each one. I didn't know why. Maybe I needed proof that my memory wasn't lying to me. The next day we met at the funeral home to pick the coffin. He brought a color swatch chart. "White's traditional, but ivory looks richer," he said. The saleswoman nodded and handed me tissues I didn't need. David asked about floral packages. I asked about the lid style, half open like a performance. He liked that. "People need closure," he said. People needed a show. We stood over fabric samples while my daughter waited in a drawer below the chapel. I watched him sign forms like he was planning a retirement party. He never looked at the urn options. Said they were too final. When I suggested we use Claire's sketchbook on the memory table, he paused. "It's personal," he said. "Might send the wrong message." I nodded. Didn't argue. Let him have the illusion. But I made a copy of her drawings that night. The moths, the faces with no mouths, the hollow eyes. I emailed them to myself under the subject, in case I needed to remind myself she was real, that her pain was tangible, that I hadn't imagined it just because David smiled so well in public. Claire's former counselor sent me a message around that time. She missed our last 2 sessions. "I'm sorry." That was all it said. No detail, no warmth, just a missing piece of time. I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? I know. She died. The silence after a death isn't quiet, it's crowded. With should-haves, almosts, and people who want to reshape the narrative for comfort. David told his staff at the middle school that Claire had battled long-standing depression. Told the church committee that she'd been distant since the divorce. Told me when no one else could hear that her death was on me, that she'd reached out and I hadn't answered. He left out the part where he blocked her number on his phone for 2 months after their last fight. He left out the part where he told her she was manipulating me. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The story was still building, and I needed to let him write enough of it before I tore the pages out. The funeral guest list swelled. Teachers, church members, reporters, old friends. David made a spreadsheet. Assigned seating. reserved rows. People need structure in grief, he said. What he meant was, control the narrative before it controls you. The night before the viewing, I lay in bed and whispered Claire's name until it didn't sound like a word anymore. I kept the old phone under my pillow. Sometimes I played the voicemail with the volume all the way down. Just her breath, her pause, the sadness wrapped in apology. He made me promise not to tell you. That line. It gnawed at me. The next day, I printed out the photo of her wall message, "Don't cry in front of him." I folded it and slipped it next to the hospital discharge sheet. Then I looked in the mirror and practiced saying nothing, because sometimes silence is the loudest form of defiance. And I needed him to think I was still afraid, still manageable, still quiet. So he'd keep talking, keep lying, keep handing me the rope. He wrote her obituary like a resume with bullet points that left out the bruises. The truth was patient. It didn't need a spotlight, just a crack. And David was starting to give me one. There's a moment at every funeral when the air changes not from grief but from judgment. It's not the tears or the tissues or the prayers. It's the sideways glances, the subtle shifts in who hugs whom first, and the little silences that grow longer than they should. At Claire's service, that moment came just after the choir stopped singing. I saw it flicker across 3 pews like a silent wave, the moment when someone whispered something just loud enough for someone else to hear. I heard she hadn't been living with her mom. No, with her dad. Or maybe someone else. I don't think they were close. Mourners are delicate creatures. They want to feel sad, not uncomfortable. David understood that. That's why he positioned himself at the church entrance, handshaking face, folding into practiced sorrow, letting each person feel they had touched grief and been dignified by it. When people approached me, their eyes darted, unsure if I was the mother who was broken or the mother who broke her. One woman, a teacher from Claire's junior year, held my hands too long. "You were so strong," she said. Not are, were, past tense. That was the rumor, Melissa, the nurse, the overbearing mom, the one who pushed too hard. It made for a better story than the truth. Denise stood by the coffee urn, arms folded, watching everything like a guard dog wearing heels. I caught her glance toward David, then back to me. She mouthed something when I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed one more crack. Inside the chapel, David had arranged for a slideshow. Photos of Claire, at 7, 9, 12. None after 17. None from college. None with friends he didn't like. Just the curated version, the daughter who posed, smiled, complied. I watched the screen and wanted to scream. Claire's best friend Lena sat 2 rows ahead. I saw her stiffen at one photo, Claire at 18, forced smile dress she hated. Lena knew that night. Knew Claire came home and ripped it off and cried because David had told her she looked cheap. I watched Lena's eyes flick toward me, then back to the screen. She knew something. I hoped she still remembered what it felt like to hold a truth that no one believed. After the service, I stepped into the hallway alone. The foyer smelled like lemon polish and dying roses. Someone had left a program folded on the floor. Claire's name in bold. Her birth date. Her end. I bent to pick it up and heard the voices before I saw them. David and his sister murmuring sharply near the side door. "She's baiting you," his sister hissed. "Let her drown." David's reply was low but hard. "I'll make sure she regrets it if she opens her mouth." I stayed hidden behind the archway, heart thudding. Denise stepped into view behind them, holding her phone, not pointed at them but ready. David's head snapped around. "Can we help you?" he said suddenly, the principal again. "Just admiring the flowers," Denise said. Then, louder. "You gonna say that again, Principal Reyes?" Real slow. His eyes darted to the red dome above them, the church's security camera. Denise's voice had been loud enough. A few people turned. David straightened his coat. "Everything okay here?" someone asked. He smiled, that soft, false smile, just emotions running high. Denise didn't move. "You said something interesting." I said, "I hoped Melissa finds peace." "That's not what I heard." "Well," he said smoothly, "grief distorts everything, doesn't it?" He brushed past her, back into the crowd, applause of sympathy awaiting. Denise didn't follow. She looked at me through the archway and nodded once. That was the moment it all started to shift. Not a revelation, not a confrontation, just enough doubt to disturb the performance. The whisper that maybe not everything added up. And when a man's eulogy doesn't match the way he glares in private, people start to notice. They start to ask. They start to watch. You don't need to scream when someone else finally hears the lie on their own. Denise had given the lie its first bruise. Now I had to decide where to land the second. The foyer hummed with small talk and funeral murmurs, the kind of meaningless sound people make when they need to fill silence that might otherwise let the truth crawl out. I stood near the side doors where the air felt cooler, fresher, less staged. The church's dome camera above the entrance blinked steadily, its lens slow panning like a patient eye. I didn't need to look for David, I knew exactly where he'd be. Holding court by the coffee urns, making sure the pastor mentioned his grief, answering the same 3 questions with the same 3 lines. Yes, she was a light. Yes, she'd been struggling. Yes, Melissa is taking it very hard. I waited until Denise gave me the look, a slight nod, barely a tilt, but I knew what it meant now. She moved first slow steps across the carpet until she was standing behind David, just as he leaned into the pastor's ear. If Melissa tries to speak, you shut it down. She's not well. That was what he said. Clear, sharp, loud enough. The pastor blinked, surprised. Denise clicked her tongue. You gonna say that again, Principal Reyes? Her voice cut the air like a sudden bell. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. David stiffened, turned slowly. Excuse me, you're excused, Denise said, stepping into the light. But your mask slipping. A ripple ran through the room. The woman from the community grief group gasped softly. David recovered fast. He always did. Let's keep this respectful, he said, raising both palms like a mediator. This is about Claire. Exactly, Denise said. So maybe don't rewrite her life while you're at it. His face twitched. What exactly are you accusing me of? Not a thing, Denise said sweetly. Just quoting what you said. Right under that camera, she pointed up. The red blink above them seemed suddenly louder. David looked at it, then at me, and for the first time in years I saw it panic. Not rage, not control, panic. I stepped forward then, not saying a word. Just standing there, calm hands folded, watching the room tilt ever so slightly away from him. People started whispering. Not about me this time. A reporter lowered his coffee. Lena took out her phone. David straightened his tie. This is grief speaking, he said too loudly. People are emotional. We should all be focusing on Claire. We are, I said softly, and the words felt like a trigger. Which is why the truth matters. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Walked away. Not quickly, but not slowly either. Like a man who knew the spotlight had shifted and didn't know how to pull it back. Denise reached for my elbow. Camera's got audio, she whispered. You ready to use it? I didn't answer. Just watched him disappear into the chapel's back door. That was the public scene. Not a fight, not a meltdown, but a fracture loud enough to echo, a shift in the wind. The lie had been clean until that moment. Now it had a scar, and that was all I needed to start bleeding it open. When control slips, even liars look for a script to read from. I had one scene left before the proof would land, and I made sure he saw it coming. The hospital smelled the same as it did when I left 2 years ago, disinfectant sharp enough to sting your nose, vending machine, coffee walls painted in that tired beige, meant to calm people who were falling apart. I hadn't come back since I quit, not even to visit the nurses who still called on birthdays, but I knew who I needed to see. Marcia, the overnight supervisor, met me in the lobby with a half smile and eyes that knew better than to ask questions. You sure you want to do this here? She asked. This is where it happened, I said. So yeah. She walked me to the records office, her badge unlocking the door with a soft beep. The filing cabinet hadn't changed, still metal gray, still labeled with the wrong label maker font. She pulled the folder out gently. You said it was February, she whispered. 3 weeks before, March 8th, I said. Claire Reyes, Psych Evil Incomplete Discharged AMA. I want to see who signed it. Marcia opened the file, flipped through a few forms, and then stopped. Her face changed just slightly, but I knew that face. Nurse face. Recognition of something that didn't line up. Here, she said, sliding the page over. I scanned it. Discharge summary. Box checked, patient left facility under parent supervision. Diagnosis: emotional dysregulation, insomnia, moderate risk. In the corner, the attending physician field was blank. Below it, a scrawled signature that was barely a name. But I knew that pen. Knew that lazy loop in the R. David had signed it. Not as a doctor. As a father pretending someone else had approved it. I pointed to the metadata. Ref ID discharge code missing clearance. Marcia nodded slowly. This shouldn't have passed. It didn't go through our system. This copy was emailed in. No logged sign-off. Whoever processed it must have gotten pressured. Can I take a photo? I didn't give you this, she said. But she left the room. I snapped 3 pictures, full form signature metadata facility code. I opened my bag and slid the copy next to the picture of Claire's wall message. 2 truths. Quiet ones, but loud enough when combined. I sat in my car outside the hospital for 30 minutes, replaying Claire's voicemail again and again. He made me promise not to tell you. Promise what? That he'd pulled her from treatment early, that he'd convinced the intake nurse she was exaggerating, that he needed to control what was said in therapy. I didn't know. I didn't need to. The document said enough. It said he'd moved her before she was ready. Said someone let it slide. Said her last chance at help got derailed by his fear of what she might say out loud. That night, I texted Lena, told her I had something. He's lying, she wrote back immediately. He always lied. She told me once he'd never let anything she said get to court. Can we talk? I asked. Yes, please. Lena came by the next day, eyes raw, sleeves pulled down. She didn't sit right away. Just looked at Claire's photo on the mantel. She was so scared, she said. Not all the time, but when it got bad. She thought if she told anyone he'd find a way to make her seem unstable. He did, I said. To me, to everyone. I handed her the hospital doc. Her eyes went wide. She told me she didn't want to leave yet. She said the place made her feel safe. First time in months. Then this happened. He forged that, not legally, just enough to get her out without a real clearance. No psych sign-off, no accountability. What do? I think I said slowly. We make it public. Not yet, but soon. I just needed to know someone else could see it too, that I wasn't imagining it. You're not. She looked at me for a long time. Thank you for not giving up on her. I did, I whispered. But not this time. After Lena left, I uploaded the photo of the hospital doc to a private folder, labeled it Evidence 1 Final. I stared at the file name until the letters blurred. It felt cold, precise, like something from a case file instead of my life. But maybe that was the point. Claire didn't need my tears anymore. She needed my receipts. That night, I went to bed with the discharge form under my pillow. It didn't comfort me, but it reminded me that the next move was mine. Some truths don't need a witness, they just need to survive long enough to be seen. I had my first piece of proof. Now I just needed the voice to go with it. Grief makes you quiet, but injustice makes you deliberate. I didn't release the hospital form right away. Instead, I leaked it. Carefully, I sent it anonymously to Lena and asked her to wait. Let it breathe, I wrote. Let him talk himself into a corner first. Claire always used to say her dad's greatest weakness was his love of his own voice. He can't stand silence, she'd say, so he fills it with what he thinks people want to hear. I used to think that made him insecure. Now I know it made him dangerous. It took 2 days, just 2. By then, the whispers at the church had become posts in a Facebook grief group, then screenshots. A pastor's assistant emailed me asking for clarity on Claire's recent medical history. She said people had questions, that they wanted to understand the timeline. I didn't respond, but I knew what was happening. The story David had sold was cracking, and the truth was starting to leak through. I called Aunt Denise the next night. It's working, I said. She didn't ask what. She knew. You want to speak at Sunday's Memorial Circle, she asked. I think it's time, I said. But not as her mother. Just as someone who loved her enough to tell the part no one else wants to hear. Make it count, she said. He's squirming. That weekend I arrived early. The church wasn't full, but it was full enough. Enough faces, I remembered. Enough people who hadn't looked me in the eye at the funeral. Enough silence that I could almost hear Claire's breath again. I carried a small folder, not to read from, just to hold. A symbol. A warning. David was already there, of course, seated in the 3rd row, hands folded back straight. I didn't look at him. Didn't need to. I was speaking to everyone else now, and they were ready. My daughter loved moths, I began. Not butterflies, moths. She said they were ugly, misunderstood, but still drawn to the light. A few people smiled. One woman near the back nodded like she remembered Claire saying something like that. She drew them all the time. I used to think it meant she liked weird things. Now I think it meant she saw herself in them. I opened the folder. Didn't show anything yet. Just tapped the papers gently. Claire spent her last few months trying to be believed, trying to be heard. And like a lot of girls who don't scream loud enough, she was told she was dramatic, that she was fine, that she was imagining things. I paused. Let the weight settle. I don't want to rewrite her story. I just want to put back the pages that were torn out. Someone near the front wiped their eyes. Lena sat on the aisle, face blank, knuckles white. I kept going. I know some of you have questions. About her, about me, about what happened. I won't answer all of them today, but I will tell you this truth doesn't shout. It whispers. It waits, and when it finally lands, it doesn't need to ask for permission to exist. I closed the folder. Still hadn't shown the form. That wasn't for now. That was for the people who would ask afterward, the people who needed to see it to believe it. The ones still hoping the lie was easier than the reality. When I sat down, the room was dead quiet. No applause, no nods. Just the kind of silence that means something just broke and no one wants to touch the pieces yet. David left before the end, didn't shake hands, didn't say goodbye, just vanished. That night, Denise called. The pastor's wife asked for a copy of what you held up, she said. She said some board members are wondering if there needs to be an internal inquiry. Did she say why? Said it was your tone? Like someone who wasn't afraid anymore. I'm not, good Denise said. Because I think they're about to ask for that folder. Some people don't believe you until your voice shakes their version of the story. The next voice they'd hear wouldn't be mine, it would be Claire's. The voicemail had lived in that old phone like a secret buried under floorboards, always there, pulsing with weight but quiet enough to ignore if you wanted to. I didn't want to anymore. Not after the church meeting. Not after the look in the pastor's eyes when he said, "Some people are starting to wonder what they weren't told." I went home and sat on the edge of my bed with the phone in my hand. It was Claire's, still scuffed with the cracked corner she never got fixed. I charged it every week like a ritual. I'd listened to the voicemail before dozens of times, but I'd never played it out loud for anyone else. That night I did. Denise sat across from me, arms crossed, not blinking. "You ready?" I asked. "Are you?" she countered. I pressed play. The sound quality was rough, muffled, like Claire had recorded it with one hand over her mouth. "Hey, Mom," her voice began, soft, breathless. "I'm okay. I wanted to say I'm sorry for not calling. I promised I wouldn't tell you. I'm sorry." Then static. Then silence. Denise didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. "Then send me that." "You think they'll believe it?" I asked. "They'll have to try," she said. "The timestamp alone makes it a problem for him." I checked it again. March 6th, 1:4 p.m. 2 days before Claire was found. 3 hours after David told me she was just out with friends. The metadata lined up, unaltered, uncut. I exported the file, labeled it Claire, audio, raw, org. Then I did something that made my hands shake. I uploaded it to a secure drive along with the hospital doc. I drafted an email to the church board. Subject line, request for review, Claire Reyes. No explanation, no editorializing. Just, please find attached documents that raise serious concerns about Claire's discharge and family environment prior to her death. I believe this is relevant to her memory and how we carry her story forward. I didn't sign it as her mother. I signed it Melissa Reyes, former RN. Authority, not emotion. Let them decide how to weigh it. Then I sent the same files to a journalist. I trusted someone who once interviewed Claire for an arts feature, someone who had looked her in the eye and listened. I didn't expect a reply that night, but I got one. "I remember her. I'm so sorry. Let me do this right." Denise read the voicemail 3 more times. "He's going to panic," she said. "Good," I answered. "Let him feel hunted for once." And he did. By noon the next day, he'd posted a vague message on Facebook. "When grief is weaponized, nobody wins." The comments were polite, concerned, then quiet. By dinner, the board had replied, "We have received your documentation. A review has been scheduled." I didn't celebrate, just stood at the kitchen sink letting the water run over my hands until they stopped shaking. At 8:02 p.m., the reporter emailed again. "Do you want your name in the article?" I stared at the screen. "Yes," I typed. "If it helps someone else believe their daughter too late, then yes." I clicked send. The story would publish in 2 days. David didn't know yet. But the silence he built his image on was about to crack. Her voice had waited long enough, and now it echoed in all the places he couldn't mute. The next headline wouldn't be his obituary for Claire, it would be the truth she left behind. David's first mistake was trying to outpace a story that hadn't finished telling itself. By the time the article dropped headlined, Claire's silence, a voicemail, a hospital form, and the questions her funeral couldn't answer, he had already sent an all-staff email at his school claiming false accusations and misuse of private finance. Grief for personal vendettas. But the damage was done. The voicemail clip was embedded in the article, voice altered slightly for protection, but still unmistakably Claire. People heard the tremble, the words, the fear. They heard he made me promise not to tell you, and suddenly all of his control unraveled. The school district launched an inquiry within hours. The church board released a statement calling the allegations deeply troubling and announced a pause on all involvement with David Reyes. The article didn't accuse, it didn't need to. It simply presented the timeline, her treatment, her discharge, the forged-looking signature, and the voicemail recorded 2 days before her death. The facts built themselves into a shape David couldn't bend. He tried, held a press conference the next morning flanked by 2 lawyers and a pastor who looked like he regretted being there. "These are incomplete records," David said, his voice quaking beneath the press's camera lights, taken out of context and used by individuals who are grieving in destructive ways. But grief didn't redact discharge codes. Grief didn't forge signatures. Grief didn't say, "He made me promise not to tell you." A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Reyes, were you present at the hospital the night your daughter was discharged?" "I was," he said. "And did you sign on behalf of a doctor?" "I signed what they asked me to. I trusted the process." "There's no physician of record listed," the reporter continued. "Do you deny writing your name on that line?" David's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at his lawyer, who shook his head. I followed the procedure given to me." "Is that a yes?" "I don't recall," he said. That phrase, so neat, so rehearsed, was the crack that widened the dam. I watched from my kitchen table, Denise beside me, Lena on speaker. When the clip ended, no one spoke for a full minute. Then Lena whispered, "He's spiraling." "Let him," Denise said. "Let him chase the story now. Let him try to stuff the truth back in the box." I knew what came next. The email, the call, the final plea. And it came that night at 9:47 p.m. My phone buzzed. "Unknown number." I answered. "Melissa," he said. His voice was smaller than I remembered. "You don't have to do this." "Do what? Turn this into a circus?" "Is that what Claire's voice sounds like to you? You know she wasn't well. I know you made sure no one believed her." Silence. "Then you'll destroy what's left of her memory." "No," I said. "I'm protecting it. From you." "She was my daughter." "Then you should have listened to her." He exhaled like he was about to cry, but no tears came. Just that fake shudder he always used when things slipped out of his hands. "I'll sue," he said. "I'll drag you through court." "Great," I said. "We'll enter the voicemail into the record. And the forged discharge. And the therapist who said she missed sessions because she was afraid of what you'd do if she kept talking. She was unstable. She was terrified," I snapped. "And now you are too. That's not grief, David. That's karma." I hung up, blocked the number, breathed. Then I sat back down and opened the email from the journalist. Attached was a PDF, a scanned memo from the school board confirming David Reyes was being placed on immediate leave pending formal review. It wasn't justice. Not yet. But it was pressure. And pressure makes the cracks grow wider. The truth doesn't need to scream, it just has to outlast the performance. He used Claire's silence to protect himself. Now her voice was everywhere he couldn't silence. I hadn't expected the voicemail to go viral. I thought people might read the article, maybe share it among local circles, maybe whisper about it in staff lounges or during school board meetings. But within 48 hours, Claire's voice, just 20 seconds of it, was being quoted in tweets, reposted in reels, looped under soft piano music and TikToks from teenagers who said, "This could have been me." The words became a quiet anthem. "He made me promise not to tell you." It wasn't just a recording now. It was a message for every daughter who'd been told to stay quiet, every mother who'd been accused of hysteria, every story reshaped by the person with more power and fewer scars. I kept the old phone in a drawer but found myself checking the drive folder more than once a day. The files were untouched, the audio still raw, the hospital form still plain and undeniable. But the world around it was changing. That week, 2 more parents reached out, one mother from Claire's high school, one former student of David's. Both told me versions of the same story: subtle threats, quiet manipulation, controlling behavior dressed in charm. "He always said the right thing," one wrote, "until you said something he didn't like." The district asked for a formal interview. I agreed. I came with documents, printouts, screenshots, a timeline Claire never got to write but left behind anyway. I didn't wear black. I didn't wear makeup. I came as a mother, a witness, a whistleblower. When the HR lead asked why I'd waited so long, I told her the truth. Because I used to think no one would believe me unless I was bleeding. And now, she asked, "Now I think maybe we're finally ready to believe women who don't have bruises." The school board reviewed the file. The church quietly removed David's name from their website. The article was cited in 2 local think pieces about power dynamics in schools, but I didn't care about legacy. I cared about impact. Claire had tried to leave a breadcrumb trail. I just followed it loud enough for others to see. That Sunday I stood in my kitchen and opened a new email from Lena. Subject line, "You need to see this." I clicked. Attached was a draft post she'd written. A caption, a photo of Claire, a voiceover with her voicemail playing behind her sketchbook pages. "I want to post this," she wrote. "Only if you say yes." I stared at the screen, then typed back, "Make it unignorable." She posted it the next day. Within hours it crossed 5,000,000 views. By the time the school board called their emergency meeting, it was at 1.2 million. The comments were full of girls saying, "I didn't know other people went through this." Boys saying, "I want to be better." Parents saying, "This makes me want to ask more questions." That night I received a notification the voicemail audio had been archived by a university project studying digital grief and narrative justice. Claire's voice had become a signal. Not noise, not drama, a signal. The one he tried so hard to bury under his grief story, and now it was louder than he could ever be. She left behind a whisper, and it became a roar in the mouths of strangers who finally heard her. Tomorrow the board would deliver their final decision. But I already knew what truth felt like. It was heavy and finally mine. The board's decision came at 10:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, delivered by email, plain text, no apology. After thorough review of documentation, recorded materials, and multiple witness interviews, the committee has voted to terminate David Ray's employment effective immediately. That was it. No fanfare, no legalese. Just a final door closing. I read it 3 times before forwarding it to Denise, then to Lena. The quiet in my kitchen didn't feel like victory, it felt like a space where something finally stopped echoing. I stepped outside with a cup of tea and sat on the porch Claire used to lie on during summer, sketching leaves she'd find interesting or crooked or ugly in a beautiful way. She said the porch was her safe window. I hadn't stepped onto it since the day she left. Now it felt like she'd saved the seat for me. 30 minutes later, a follow-up email arrived from the same board account. "Following your testimony and document submission, and with respect to the impact on the community and student trust, the board will also be implementing a review of internal reporting procedures. You will be invited to participate if you wish." I stared at that sentence for a long time, not because it absolved me, but because it meant the story didn't end with David losing something. It continued with someone else building better. Denise texted, "You did it," I replied, "Claire did." Then I opened the folder I'd kept zipped for months, printed every single file, her drawings, the discharge form, the voicemail transcript. I arranged them like chapters and slid them into plastic sleeves. Not for court, not for media, for memory, for proof. For me, I labeled the front, "The Truth Claire Left," and put it on the shelf next to the photo album she never got to finish. That afternoon, the local news picked up the story. I watched from my laptop as the anchor recapped the sequence, the hospital's procedural error, the forged sign-off, the voicemail, the community response. They ran a photo of Claire, one she hated, the one from her last school ID, but it was her face, her real one, and for once the story under it wasn't manufactured by her father, it was hers. A day later I received a call from the university media department. "We're creating a digital archive," the woman said, "for young women whose stories were overwritten. Would you let us include Claire's audio?" I thought of the way her voice cracked in that message. I thought of all the girls who might hear it and recognize themselves. "Yes," I said, "but only if it includes the words she was too afraid to say." "We'll include the silence too," the woman promised. "It matters just as much." That night I dreamed of Claire not as she was when she died, but as she might have been if she'd been believed sooner. Strong, soft-eyed, holding a sketchbook in one hand and a microphone in the other. When I woke up, I wasn't crying. I was breathing. And that was new. The voicemail stayed in the drawer, but the audio lived everywhere, now in podcasts, classrooms, advocacy circles. Girls began writing to me. Mothers. Teachers. This made me look at someone differently. This made me reach out. I wish I'd heard her voice sooner. I answered every single one, not with advice, just with a reminder. You heard her now. That's enough. David never contacted me again. Last I heard, he'd moved 2 states over, tried to apply for work at a charter school, and was flagged by the press trail. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just let the truth keep moving without me having to push it. One morning, Lena sent a final message. I listened to her sketchbook flip in the background of the voicemail. I think she left that sound in on purpose. I listened again. Page turn. Page turn. A breath. Silence. That silence used to feel like the end. Now it felt like a comma. I thought the truth would break him, but it just set her free. The funeral ended long ago. But Claire's story didn't, and neither did mine. The first time I stood in Claire's old bedroom after everything, I didn't cry. I expected to. I thought the smell of her shampoo, still clinging to the curtains, or the one moth sticker still stuck to her mirror, or the pile of books she never returned to the library would shatter me. But instead it felt like being inside a memory that had finally exhaled. Like the room was no longer holding its breath. I didn't touch anything for a while. Just sat on the edge of her bed looking at the poster she'd sketched herself and pinned up crookedly. A girl with wings, but not fairy wings. Something rougher. Moth wings. Wings that belonged to something soft and attracted to danger. Her handwriting in the corner read, "She only lands where the lights are most dangerous." That's who Claire was. Drawn to people who flickered hot, to truths that burned. And in the end, that's what she became for others, a light, dangerous, and needed. The archive at the university launched the following month. They named the section, Housing Claire's Story, Whispers That Survived. Her voicemail sat at the top of the digital shelf. The sketchbook images played in a slideshow alongside her words. Not for pity, for presence. She wasn't a warning anymore. She was a witness. I received an invitation to speak on a panel. Parental Narratives and Silenced Youths When Authority Writes the Wrong Story. I said yes. Not because I thought I could fix anything, but because I wanted to sit in a room where the world had shifted enough to ask the right questions. The night before the event, I rehearsed aloud in Claire's room. Read her words from the hospital intake form, from her sketchbook, from the voicemail. Then I spoke mine. My daughter died before she could testify. But she left enough behind to testify for herself. And now I'm just the amplifier. Denise came with me. So did Lena. We sat in the front row as people filed in: therapists, survivors, educators, students. People who'd never met Claire but now carried a piece of her. I spoke quietly. Just like she did. No podium pounding. No dramatic crescendos. Just the truth delivered plainly, the way Claire always wanted her drawings to be seen without performance. Afterward, a teenage girl approached me. Her hands shook when she handed me a note. "He told me no one would believe me either," she whispered. I folded the paper and held her eyes. "We believe you now," I said. "We believe you before you even say it out loud." That's the thing about truth. Once it finds a voice, it echoes. It builds. It doesn't fade. David faded, eventually. A mention in a legal filing. A denied application. A community that quietly stepped back and left him without a stage. But I didn't follow his ending. I didn't need to. My story wasn't about him anymore. It never was. 1 year after Claire's death, we held a different kind of memorial. Not in a church, not with hymns. In a library conference room filled with folding chairs and kids wearing headphones, reading transcripts, listening to voices that once trembled, they printed Claire's sketchbook and gave it a spine. Titled it, Landing in the Dark. Her name on the cover. No co-author. No footnote saying daughter of. Just Claire. Whole. Heard. After everyone left, I stayed back. Sat beside the table where her drawings fanned out. Closed my eyes and whispered, "I hope this feels like light." I think it did. Some legacies scream. Some shine. Claire's hums soft, steady, unstoppable. The story didn't end when she stopped speaking. It began when the world finally listened. And now when girls whisper, he made me promise not to tell they know someone already broke that promise for them.